Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Richard Lederer, author and Boomer Times columnist, and so many other things. He's been an avid speaker everywhere. He used to come down here to South Florida. He lives in San Diego. And Richard Lederer is funny. I want to tell you something, Richard. I had a friend who came down here. I hadn't met. She used to be in Boca. I hadn't met her for many years. She lives in San Diego. And I was mentioning, you said, of course I know who Richard Lederer is. I said, really? Isn't that great? So that's right. Yeah, people just know.
ANITA, it just proves I'm a household name in my own household.
Yes, in your own household. Well, it was great. Okay, so Richard does write astonishing, amazing articles. I mean, every time he writes one, it's like, where does he get that stuff from? But he's got something perfect. We just had President's Day, and you wrote lots of interesting things about that. So why don't you tackle that for this show?
My pleasure, especially in this year of electile dysfunction. This is very timely. And, of course, we are the oldest democracy around. Our Constitution is the shortest and is a model for many, many others around the world. And so we need to know our history. What's going to be special today, ANITA, is that those listening in, those millions of listeners to our show, are going to get some bar bets from me. And by bar bet, I don't mean a woman named Barbette, but you use these for bets, and you will win your, Shirley Temple, Coca-Cola, margarita, scotch, whatever, because most people will not get these. So I thought we'd start with those. And here we go. And I'll do a little pause, ANITA, if you ever want to jump in, and then if not, I'll just give the answer.
Okay,
Sound
go
good?
ahead. Yeah, you just keep going.
How many men have been president of the United States? And it has been all men because we've had only XY chromosomes like me. So how many men have been U.S. presidents? Pause. Okay, most people will say 45 because Donald John Trump is our 45th president. But the answer is 44. And the reason for that is one of our presidents served non-sequentially, Grover Cleveland, in the fairly late 19th century, served as our 22nd and 24th. There was a term in between that he didn't serve because he had been defeated, and then he came back to the White House. So some idiot counted him as two presidents because he was non-sequential, and therefore the math is irremediably thrown off forever. It can't be fixed. So Trump is listed as our 45th president, and in a sense he is, but only 44 men have served in the office. You will win that bar bet quite a bit.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we got that now.
I'm going to give a bunch, and these, of course, this is learning dressed up to have fun, ANITA, which is what I try to do, of course. So here's another one. 7 of our first 10 presidents were Virginians. It was the most powerful colony before we became a nation. And 7 of our first 10 presidents, and that is from George Washington through John Tyler, and including those 2, were born in Virginia. Virginia is known as the birthplace of presidents. The third, and the only exceptions there, ANITA, are, of course, the Adamses, both from Massachusetts, and Andrew Jackson from the Carolinas. So the other 7 were all Virginians, and numbers 3, 4, and 5, and that would be Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, each served 2 terms. So they each served 8 years, 3 of them 24 years. So I just want to be clear to our bazillions of listeners, even if you're not from Brazil, you'll enjoy this one. Okay. It's good knowledge, and that is, so these 3 served 8, 8, and 8. It's happened only one other time in American history. Only one other time where 3 presidents were each reelected and lived through the second term, so they served 24 years. Who are those presidents? And my bazillion friends out there, I would not, you know me well enough to know I would never throw this at you unless you knew these presidents. 8, 8, and 8. So don't think about Roosevelt because he served into, although not much into, his fourth term. But we need 24 years of three guys, 8, 8, and 8. Do, 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 do. And the answer is essentially our presidents. Bill Clinton served 2 terms. He was succeeded by George W. Bush, who served 2 terms, and in turn, they were succeeded by Barack Obama, who served 2 terms. It took almost 2 centuries for that to happen a second time. If Donald Trump is reelected, we will then have 4 in a row. That would make it 32 years, and that would be the first in history. And we'll find out fairly early in November if that happens. Interesting stuff, huh? Let me do some more, because there's a lot of history in these. What 2 men died on the same, presidents died on the same day, and can you name the day and, if possible, the year?
Of course not.
And the answer is, well, actually, Anita knows all these, but, she pretends to.
You're so bad, right.
So here we go. It's John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Here's the story, one of the great stories in American history. Adams was our second president, and he ran against Jefferson. They were the 2 main candidates to see who would succeed George Washington, as president. Adams won. He became president. Anita, believe it or not, in those days, the guy who came out second was then the vice president of the guy who won. Can you imagine a Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton administration? But by the old rules, that would have happened. Why? Because partisanship, tribalism, yada, yada, was not nearly as strong. So Jefferson became the vice president, and then when Adams ran for a second term, Jefferson opposed him and won, meaning that the vice president defeated the president, and Jefferson became our third president.
Now that's
So
interesting.
that
very
didn't fit
interesting.
so well. Well, if I may say, all of this is in my president's book, Presidential Trivia. And if anybody wants to go online, verbivore.com, you'll see it listed there. I'd be happy to send you a copy signed and inscribed if, obviously, you follow the protocols. So
now, before you continue, you said that how many books have you actually written again?
I just finished my 54th this past Sunday.
54th book. I am just astonished.
Stop me before I write again, everybody. Stop me before.
Okay, now,
well,
what year?
You know, on the 54 books, so what happens is, and I'm a very fast writer, so what happened is somebody phoned the other day, and my wife, Simone, picked up the phone, and the voice said, "Is Richard Lederer there?" She said, "Yes, he is, but he's writing a book." And the voice on the phone said, "That's okay. I'll just hang on here until he's finished."
That's fantastic. Well, tell me what the year was, the first one.
Depends how you count it. I wrote a number of school books, but my first, shall we say, mass market book was Anguished English, and it happened my first book sold more than 1 million copies. The second was Get Thee to a Punnery, and the 4 I've just completed writing. Now there's going to be editing and, proofing and this and that. Verbivore Feast, a treasury of Halloween humor, treasury of Christmas humor, and the one I finished a few days ago is called Richard Lederer's Ultimate Book of Literary Trivia.
Okay, but
So,
when you didn't give me a date of your
oh
first
no,
book.
they're all out next year. So
No,
no
your
need to
first
do it.
book that
Oh,
you
my
ever
first
wrote.
book, 1987, if you don't count the school books. And
No,
that
no,
was
the one
Anchorage.
for the public, 1987.
Right.
At the time you wrote that book, did you know you were going to go on to write a lot more books?
Not a clue.
Yeah.
Not a clue. And often when I'm finished, it's like, okay, this is it, and I get my life back.
Right.
So, for example, my current book is The Joy of Names. It's my 50th book. What a great number.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then in came this 4-book contract from Imberfrux Books that I just couldn't I couldn't refuse it. So
Right.
you never know. So at any rate, but so obviously that didn't sit well with John Adams. But back in those days, they used to write letters to each other. Letters. Some of you listening may remember. Pen to paper, and you put it in something called an envelope and put a stamp on it. And ultimately, they reconciled, and it came to January 3rd, 1826, Anita. So that's 50 years after the first Independence Day. And one day short, Jefferson lay dying in his late 80s at Monticello, his estate. And before he started to lose consciousness on the 3rd, and asked somebody there, "Is it the glorious fourth?" And to humor the old man, this fellow said, "Yes, it is." He lost consciousness, but was still alive till about 1 p.m. on July 4th, 50 years to the day. Meanwhile, Adams was shuffling off his mortal coil in Massachusetts, Quincy, Massachusetts, his home. But he was conscious enough to see and hear the celebratory fireworks exploding in the sky. And at about 7 p.m. on that day, he died. And his famous last words, Anita, were, "Jefferson survives." He was wrong. But they, not only didn't they have computers or telephones or even Morse code, but at any rate, there was no way to know. And so they both died 50 years to the day.
Really?
From the first Independence Day. So let's do a few more of these because they're fun.
Yep.
Okay. Now, here's an easy question for the folks out there. Who was the last presidential candidate to win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College and hence lose the presidency?
Well, we know that. Isn't it true?
Well, you have to tell me we know that. Who is it?
Hillary.
You've got it. It was Hillary Clinton. Now, a little harder question, but well within our memory, is who did that happen to do before Hillary?
Oh. No, I don't.
And in fact, the state that most of the listeners are in, including Anita, is the state that made the difference in the election.
Well, it's got
Al Gore.
Yep. Oh, boy.
So Al Gore, 16 years earlier, at any rate, he did win the popular vote but lost the election, the Electoral College, and the issue is which side would Florida, go on, and the Supreme Court decided Florida. Well, there were 3 others before that. Very quickly, Grover Cleveland in the 1880s, he won the election, and then he won the popular vote, but lost the Electoral College to Benjamin Harrison, grandson of William Henry, and then came back and won both in. So Grover Cleveland was the 3rd. The 4th, 12 years earlier, was Samuel J. Tilden losing the Rutherford B. Hayes in the most corrupt election ever.
Really?
And the 5th will surprise people.
Okay.
Andrew Jackson, in the election campaign of 1824, he lost to John Quincy Adams. Most people don't know that Jackson lost before he won the 2 terms. And the question for my dear friends out there is, aside from winning the popular vote but losing the Electoral College, what else do these 5 people have in common? And the answer will surprise you.
Okay, I have no idea.
All Democrats. It
Really?
has never happened to a Republican in American history. All of those 5, and now I'll go through time, so I'll start at the other end. Andrew Jackson, Samuel Tilden, Grover Cleveland, Al Gore, and Hillary Clinton, all Democrats. A Republican has never lost an election under those terms.
Well, that's an amazing story. You wonder why.
Well, in part, if you look at how the Electoral College was formed, it was to somewhat tamp down the power of the large populous states and cities, and to some extent, the great unwashed factory worker. So it tends to tilt it in a certain direction. But no Republican that has happened to. Now, here's the fun one for the day. I want to be sure to get this in before our 2.5 hours are up. And folks out there, I'm just kidding, but it will seem that long. But I hope you're writing this down, and if not, you can write me, my friends, at Richard H. Lederer. You got to get the H in, Lederer, no dots, at gmail.com. And if you say, gee, send me those funny, informative, fascinating facts, of course I will. Richard H. Lederer, Lederer, at gmail.com. Okay. Who was our youngest president? I want to get these in.
I was thinking John Kennedy, was he?
And almost everybody would, and the answer is our second youngest. Because John Kennedy was 43 and 7 months. And, of course, young, good-looking guy, great head of hair, gorgeous wife, 2 very young children for a president, and actually a third was in the oven, Patrick, a last stillborn. So you got to figure it's Kennedy. But no, 9 months younger, Theodore Roosevelt, Anita.
Really?
Now, he was not elected, but I didn't use the word elected. He became president very young after the assassination of his president, William McKinley. So in came Teddy at 42 and 10 months, and he was only 50 when he got termed out, at least, in his view. They didn't have that amendment then. So you're going to win that bar bet, folks, because almost everybody will say Kennedy or
Right.
They don't know. Now that we go to our youngest president, who was our oldest president,
Oh, boy.
who entered the Oval Office.
Oh, boy.
We now know that it was Teddy Roosevelt, who was our oldest man to become president.
I don't have the faintest idea.
Well, you will after this, young lady, and here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Before that, and most people will say Ronald Reagan, 69 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks, meaning just a couple of weeks short of 70, and more remarkably, left office after 2 terms, 2 weeks short, on the cusp of 78. That's rare. The only other president until recently was Dwight Eisenhower. He turned 70 the last 10 months of his administration. Donald Trump turned 70 in August of 2016. So he was 70 and a number of months coming into office. So it is Donald Trump, and of course quite a bit of vigor for somebody that age. And of course now he's 73 and all of that. So it's Donald Trump. Now, speaking of age, and this one I want a good pregnant pause, so to speak.
Okay.
This is the best of all bar bets. Here we go. My friends out there, can you name 5 presidents of the United States who are not buried in the United States? That's B-U-R-I-E-D. Are not buried on or in American soil.
goodness.
5 presidents,
Wow.
Anita,
And
are...
I can't get over it. What a question. Remember, everyone, you're listening to Richard Lederer, who's an author and Boomer Times columnist, and You can actually get onto his website by going to Richard. Let's see, I have this. You didn't put it down for me, huh?
No, verbivore.com
Right,
is
verbivore,
my website.
verbivore.com.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
tell us now, who?
Yeah, and
Pray
the other
tell.
was my email, richardlederer@gmail.com. And, if you have a language question or anything, or even a presidential one, you're welcome to email me. All right, here are the 5 men who you will agree qualify as U.S. presidents, and they are not buried in the United States.
Huh, I have no
You ready?
idea.
Here it comes. Are you sitting down, Anita?
I am.
Good. That's a good idea. Here we go. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton.
Wait. Tell us where they're buried.
They're not. They're alive.
Oh, you're so bad. Oh, God.
Yeah, hey, folks, I want to say goodbye to you because now she's really upset with me and she'll never
I'm
take
not,
another
but
column.
Oh, so that was a funny one. Oh,
But the others are sort of. But so Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, that's 3. Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And incidentally, Jimmy Carter has 2 things about longevity. One is he long ago passed Herbert Hoover as the longest serving as ex-president. Of course, it helps when you have only one term and you live to 95. But Jimmy Carter is the longest live president. He was born in 1924, and so he is full of years, the most, and the longest serving as ex-president, and that would be Jimmy Carter. Speaking about older, but here's the thing about age, and I know that's somewhat the demographic that you serve so wonderfully, my friend, and that is, look at the candidates now, and for the most part, obviously Buttigieg an exception, but Elizabeth Warren has turned 70 during these campaigns here in debates. Bernie, all in their 70s, Elizabeth Warren, Michael Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders, and of course Trump himself, and so on. And they
you
all
didn't say
are
Biden, did you?
and Joe Biden, of course, right, in his later 70s. And look at the vigor of them. And this is the point. The average age of an entering president, Anita, has been 54. Now, we could well have the 2 final candidates in their 70s. And in the last election, as I mentioned, Donald J. Trump had turned 70 in August before the election, and Hillary Clinton had turned 69. So usually your 2 main candidates total about 108. In this case, it was 139. In other words, with modern medicine is modern, and it has a great effect on longevity. Both my parents were born in the 19th century because I came very late, 1894 and 1899. And then the lifespan was 46 and a half. And now it's late 70s or early 80s, depending if you're an XX or XY chromosome. It is a heck of a great time to be a senior. And it's not just the extra years, it's the quality of the years.
Yep, it is a different. Of course, I've always believed that older adults are very smart, and I don't really think the age should matter. I think, as a matter of fact, I like the idea of older adults running for president. Of course, people say, well, then maybe it should be a younger vice president, just in case. Well, I don't care about that, really.
Interesting. And as we speak, Stacey Abrams from Georgia has indicated her willingness to be a vice president. We do know this: older voters are way more reliable than younger voters.
Yep.
And so we know, for example, with Senator Sanders that he has, significant following with younger voters, but they're not as reliable in terms of going to the polls. And incidentally, on that, studies, very reputable studies, indicate that older is wiser. That there is, I guess I'd call it an accretion of wisdom as you age. We make very good mentors, mediators, and so on. When I say we, I happen to be just on the cusp of 82 now, and
look at you. You see, so that's why I say it's absolutely, it's not important, especially if you're healthy and all. I think you bring so much to it, and a lot of people were a lot more into all the things now with the internet and all that. Years ago, people said, "Oh well, they don't do the internet. They don't." That's not true. Everyone's got their cell phone. They've got on there. So anyway, I think that's
Absolutely.
a big discussion.
And what a gift, and what a gift all of that is. So here's one last one. Just again on the, the snapping shut of the steel trap, the jaws of the steel trap. Have we ever had a president who was not born in the United States?
I don't know.
Well, according to Donald Trump, we did. His name is Barack Obama.
Yeah, of course.
But that seems to have been disproved. But the answer is, believe it or not, we've had 9 of them. And here's why, and you're going to continue to hate me, but you have me back on, so what the heck? The answer is 9 of our first 10 presidents, Anita, they were born before 1776. So they were all
right.
British subjects in the American colonies.
Great. Yep, that's great.
And you
Great
had
answer.
to be born after 1776. And that was our 8th president, Martin Van Buren. He was born a little bit after. But 1 through 9 were not. Washington and into William Henry Harrison. So I may have misstated, but 8 out of our first 9 were not born citizens of the U.S.
Well, this is a great show, really, Richard. Thank you. And we've just now run out of time. But I have to say that every time you come on the show, I always have a big smile on my face. So you titillate me. You just, I laugh, and I know that our listeners always enjoy it, and they enjoy your columns so much. So thank you for taking the time, and good luck on your new book.
Well, thank you. And on that, I just have to quote Groucho Marx quickly. He wrote a letter to an author, and it said, "From the moment I received your book, I've been laughing uproariously. One day I hope to read it."
You're too much.
I love your laugh.
Yeah, you're so good. Thank you. Stay well, and we'll talk soon, I hope, okay?
For sure.
All right. Bye.